everyone. Welcome back to the Whatcha Watchin podcast. And this time it's a very special episode because I am joined by Andrew Levins, the co-host of one of my favorite podcasts of all time, Hey Fam. Levins, thank you so much for doing this. And
very
welcome.
Happy to be here.
Thanks.
You've tried to get me on a few times, mainly because we both are like the only people we know who watch one of the most like overproduced TV shows on television, and that is the morning show. I don't know anyone else besides my wife that watches it, and every season it gets more and more insane. So I think at some point we do need to commit to a proper deep dive together.
It's true.
It's nice to be meeting and talking about something actually good.
Yeah, exactly. We can talk about good stuff first before we get into like our shared trauma of watching the morning
you know what?
show.
I've got to be truthful. One of us definitely thinks this thing is good, but who?
I mean, I feel like people can probably guess based on my gigantic crush on Prabhas how I feel about this movie, but we'll get into it. We'll figure out all that stuff. I think this is definitely a huge movie. Today, I haven't prefaced it, but we're talking about Kalki 2898 AD, gigantic Indian super smash movie. It's doing really well at the box office. It's breaking records that have only been achieved by Rajamouli's RRR before in terms of US and UK box office. It's a sensation. It combines sci-fi, Hindu mythology. It's got stars from Hindi cinema, from Telugu cinema. It's all over the place. It's basically just a gigantic thing that I'm like, everybody should be aware of at some point. So
it's only gained popularity since coming out in Australia too. It was only screening maybe like 4 or 5 screenings a day at my local cinema last week when it came out, and now it is screening more than 10 per day for the rest of the week, which is crazy.
Yeah, I noticed that here too. Usually, like, especially the theater by my house, we get Indian movies for maybe like 48 hours. It's the kind of thing where I'm like, I have to like make a point to see it on opening day because that shit will disappear immediately. So I was like, oh, I got to get my tickets early. I got to go see this. And then it was like, oh, they're extending it another week. So clearly this is something where the audiences are going to it. It's getting word of mouth. It's growing a lot. So I'm like, okay, I think it's going to be a hit. Now, whether it's, comparable to RRR quality wise, we'll decide. We'll debate that. But, definitely a smash in terms of box office numbers for sure.
Yeah. So you saw it the day it came out, right?
I did. I was just like, this was one of those ones I had been following along with the making of it for a while. Just because I'm very, Levins knows, because I've been like, obsessed with sort of Telugu cinema. I've done this insane deep dive on it since RRR. I've watched like 100 Telugu movies. I'm just like beyond,
which is so impressive.
It.
I'm like, I wish I could have. I commit myself to the insane acts across the board, but for you to focus in like you did is so impressive and cool. I like you. I was obsessed with RRR when it came out and watched all of Rajamouli's movies. But then I left it at that.
Yeah, Rajamouli, though, it's like it's hard for anything to equal that,
Yeah, of course. I dipped my toe into the YRF spy universe Hindi movies.
Excellent.
But, yeah, the RRR for me is still like as good as any movie gets, and it's unfair of me to expect any Telugu movie coming forward to be as good as that, because frankly, like, any movie from anywhere isn't.
Totally.
That movie like was I don't know what expectations I had going in. I just had a few people tell me like the moment it came to Netflix, hey, you make sure you see this one. And so I watched it that night, and I think my wife and I were like, oh, it's a 3-hour movie, like our kids will wake us up early, maybe we'll do half now, half tomorrow, and we hit that halfway point. And Indian movies, for better or worse, have a very definitive halfway point. There's an intermission in all these movies, but we hit that intermission and we were like, oh, we're watching the whole thing tonight, right? Whereas we watched the already 2 movies in 2 parts, so it's a 4-part epic that is Baahubali. We watched that over 4 nights, and I love Baahubali. Of course, that stars the same lead actor as Kalki, but RRR is just like as good as like an action movie gets to me. It's so on so many levels.
It's true. I feel like Rajamouli movies just give you like it's over the top in all the right ways. He gives you the most moviest movie, you could even imagine, where it's like, it's going to have comedy, it's going to have a little romance, it's going to have action, it's going to have everything. The CG is going to be amazing. It's just going to be like shit you've never seen before in your life, that you're like, why doesn't every movie do this? That was completely RRR.
You sent me the trailer for this one, for Kalki. What's the year? I know you know the year, Bob.
2898
AD. You sent me the trailer for this, and you were like, "This one looks really, really good." So you were on top of this one early. You were building hype. I think because I feel like I don't know this, but I feel like you're the only person that you hang out with day to day that watches these movies, right? Like,
for real.
Yeah.
I have some of my friends like have seen them. Like, I've showed my friends Baahubali, I've showed my friends RRR, and they love them. They're like, yeah, this is amazing. But I'm like, okay, but here's the deal, guys. Okay, so that's Prabhas. So Prabhas was in this movie such and such. I have this like insane deep dive of it where it's this knowledge that I'm like, this applies to nothing. This can help me in no areas of my life.
Yeah, I love that you're like, I know an Australian podcast host on the other side of the world. He's who I can connect with on these things. So you went into this movie with only your own hype. Like, you were very, very excited for it, but you had no expectations beyond it being a movie with one of your favorite actors in it. I went into this movie after you told me it was better than RRR.
I don't know if I said it was better than RRR.
And gave it 5 stars on Letterboxd.
A big deal. I did give it 5 stars on Letterboxd.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, it's impossible for me to be like, I try to, I'm a film critic. I try to be very like, okay, let me look at this from like a real perspective. Let me be fair and balanced. But with this, I'm just like, listen, I love Prabhas. That's automatically 3 stars. If it's even a little bit good on top of that, it's going to be a 5 for me.
Yeah. So like midway, even like 20 minutes into this movie, I was like, is this really like, did I see the right one?
I think that's fair. The first half of this movie, because I've seen a lot of criticism of like the first half is tonally kind of all over the place and things like that. I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, the comedy doesn't always work. And I think that that's valid. But for me, the second half was where it just got like so insane in a way that I was like, oh my God, I'm so on board for this.
The biggest knock that I like, because I did ultimately enjoy this movie. I think even when it is bad, it is funny bad, that I was still having a good time. There's some insane tonal shifts where it will go from a very, very hard, like I saw someone compare it to Handmaid's Tale in parts, and then it will be like whenever Prabhas is on screen, especially in those first scenes, it's like this like goofy take on Iron Man, where you have like this like reluctant, like wisecracking hero with a vague power suit.
It takes the like weirdness of those ideas, and it's like, it's a little bit Dune, it's a little bit Star Wars, it's a little bit Blade Runner, it's a little bit Jupiter Ascending and Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. It's like 20 million things merged into one in a way that I really like.
Yeah, that was one of the coolest parts of it. And because especially because we've seen a film try that significantly less successfully in the last year, with that, was it called Brahmastra?
Yeah.
Which was a Hindi movie that came out in 2022.
Yes.
And I guess that was like the first big like Indian blockbuster I saw after RRR. And I was like, here we go. And
Totally.
Even on the way, I've told this on my own podcast years ago, but on the way to the movies, I was in an Uber and my driver asked me where I was going, and he was Indian, and I said I was going to go see a movie, and I told him what it was, and he was like, oh, you should just turn around and head back home. It's shit.
Which I think is the best review. And then when you got out, you were like, yeah, no, that's accurate.
Listen to your Uber drivers. They know.
Yeah, I think there's been a real kind of like push to have a cinematic universe because India, I mean, they make like 1,100 movies a year or something across all the industries in India. And I think that there has not been like a big emphasis on sci-fi in Indian cinema. And I think the idea of the shared universe kind of hasn't really been a big thing. I mean, like Baahubali was like a 1 and 2, but it wasn't like a 26 movie, like there hasn't been an MCU really for Indian cinema. And I think that's where Brahmastra was getting set up as being like, and this is going to be our MCU. And then it was just like, no, it's not very good. So I'm glad to see Kalki be a cinematic universe, because I'm like, well, maybe this has potential, this could potentially be something like that.
Yeah, and the mythology is a far better successful update with the sci-fi stuff than it was just like, boring superhero stuff in
Totally.
Brahmastra. You could definitely notice Indian cinema taking a lot of notes and inspiration from American blockbusters, especially with this new one. But also their fans, the viewers, take a lot of influence from the superhero movie bro viewers in the West as well. And when a movie that they don't like is failing, they will yell it from the rooftops.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely, there's no participation trophies in Indian cinema fandom.
No.
It's like, this is very like, this is serious. They love it or they hate it. And I have discovered that myself in the comments for my review of this on TikTok.
I think with Kalki, and we'll get into it, and I'm prefacing what I'm sure is going to be a far more positive take from you, but I can always like forgive some goofy writing, some not always amazing acting, and some better than usual CGI. This is a very ambitious movie in showing, it's sometimes I feel like the more barren it is on screen, the worse it looks. Whereas when they put more shit everywhere, it actually looks more impressive. But the only place this movie really let me down was from an action point of view. I didn't think the action set pieces in this were at all on the level that I was expecting from a blockbuster that has not just the Rajamouli seal of approval, but he is involved in this movie in a way which we'll get to later. It also did not help that only like 3 days before I saw Kalki, I saw a new Hindi movie called Kill, which is very, very different subject matter, but happens to include some of the best action scenes I've ever seen in my life. And that movie had that same thing that RRR had, which is a complete surprise factor into being not what I expected and being above and beyond what an action movie can deliver for me. So it's unfair to compare those things, but I did see them within days of each other. They're from the same country. It was really, really difficult not to make that comparison point. So I was really excited to see Prabhas in this movie because I was like, oh, cool. Like his action scenes in Baahubali were amazing. And I mean, especially that first one where it's like he's revealed as the character. It's so slow, and like, I guess the emphasis is far more on the comedy of it, but I think that some of the comedy is lost in translation when you're literally reading the jokes instead of hearing them. Maybe it was funnier to people that can speak Telugu, but I saw it in like a half full cinema, and no one was really giggling or chuckling throughout those scenes. So yeah, I don't know. It was a very awkward introduction to that character, but I agree with you. It definitely gets better as it goes along, and the second half is far, far better than the first.
What I loved was later, there's a sequence where he's fighting Amitabh Bachchan's character Ashwin, and it's like that to me was where I was like, okay, I love this. They're doing like a sort of chase through the desert that feels very sort of Mad Max-ish. They arrive at this giant sort of statue where the hand of the statue falls down, and then there's this giant fight sequence in there, and that I was like, okay, that I'm on board. Like I like this. I feel like the comedy in There's Landing where they punch and he punches his hand and then he's like, like I was like, okay, that's working for me. That was what I think that intro scene didn't accomplish that I think it was going for.
I was far more impressed by the old guy in that scene. What's his name? Amitabh
Bachchan, yeah.
Yeah, he was, and hilariously, he was actually in Brahmastra, right?
Yes, he's in like everything. He's like a Hindi movie like legend. So I think it was a big deal for them to get him in this. And then I love him as like, obviously this is a character from Hindu mythology, but for us, it's kind of like this, almost like, what if Gandalf, but he kicked ass, It's like, I love that,
Because we first see him, like, it's a very strange CGI version of him because it's set, thousands of years ago. When he was, it was a battle of the gods, and one of his actions basically puts everything in place to lead to like the apocalypse, post-apocalyptic scenario that we have in this movie. But it's up to him to kind of eventually save the world. And I didn't recognize him at first in that weird, I don't know what bizarre effect they did on his face.
There was some weird de-aging that was a little rubbery, and I just kept thinking, like, I wonder why they didn't just choose to do like a deep fake, because he's been in movies for so many years. There's got to be infinite footage of him that you could sort of train a deep fake to do.
Yeah, for me, I just thought like a practical, like heavy makeup effect would have been way more convincing.
Also, he has a son who looks exactly like him, so I'm like, you could just cast his son.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure.
He brings such an intensity that I was like, his character to me, it was absolutely the standout here, where I was like, I love Prabhas, but by the end of this, I was like, damn, Amitabh Bachchan really kicked ass in this movie. Like, I was so impressed by him. So I was like, that takes a lot for someone to steal my focus from Prabhas, who I love and is like such my movie crush, you know?
Can we talk about the prologue to the prologue? And
Yeah.
that is one of my favorite things about watching Indian movies, no matter how big a budget they are. My favorite thing about watching them is that the logos you get before each movie, it's not just all the studios, and there are many studios involved in these movies. It's like the banks. It's
Yes.
like the restaurants that they ate at. It's all of these local businesses that get like full logo up on the screen, and they just cycle through. It was a solid minute of like
for
very,
sure.
very like generic, like, badly cut out square logos. Great stuff. The movie has, like, I would say, is it 3 or 4 kind of storylines happening at the same time. And I didn't realize that this was part 1 of who knows how many, the beginning of a cinematic universe, as you say. But you quickly realize, oh God, like, we actually haven't, like, we were introduced to like this young girl who pretends to be a boy at the start of the movie, who like basically like, it's almost Mad Max inspired at first. You're in this like post-apocalypse world where it's almost like every man for himself. There's a bunch of like very cool looking dictators that make all the rules, and bounty hunters and all that. But yeah, she escapes them and then meets I can't remember who she meets, but like, you don't see her again for a good hour, it felt like, until she finds old man bandages. And yeah, towards the first half, I was like, this isn't even going to be like wrapped up in the next 2 hours, is it?
That's what I kept wondering too. As I was watching it, at first I was like, oh, okay. Like, cause I also did not know that this was a cinematic universe. And I think that was kind of a thing that they were not sort of saying a lot in promotion for it. I think they were maybe not sure if it was going to be a cinematic universe. So I didn't even start seeing them promote that until like, the past couple days. But yeah, as I was watching it, I was sort of like, well, I don't know how they're going to wrap this all up. Like, we only have maybe another 30, 40 minutes of this movie, and there's no way they're going to be able to get this all together. But yeah, there were a lot of those storylines where I was like, well, but they haven't really done anything with Deepika Padukone's character, and that's got to be something. She did the cool Daenerys through the fire thing, and I was like, oh, all right. And then I sort of started to realize, like, oh, that'll be later. We'll see more of that in like a later installment or something. Same with our bad guy Supreme Yaskin, who's played by Kamal Hassan. I was like, where, like, he's just kind of floating in this thing, and he's just this sort of badass guy, this very like emperor vibes. And I was like,
and he has his own Darth Vader.
Totally, yes, exactly. And I just kept being like, okay, but like, he's a huge actor and a huge legend. And I was like, I don't think they would get him in to be in like 5 minutes of this movie. Like, there's got to be more to this. So that was, as I started to think about the casting of these enormous actors and the percentage that they were in of the movie, was where I was like, oh, okay, we're doing a cinematic universe here.
Yeah, I also think that like the next one, like, you would open it at the most heightened part. You tell a bit of story of the background of our 2 main leads, who have just been revealed to have a quite a close link. But I feel like all of that awkward kind of like, what are they doing now? Hopefully won't be in the sequel.
Yeah, I got a sense that a lot of that was in the kind of setup portion of this, of like, oh, we need to show Prabhas as this kind of like doesn't care, selfish guy, blah, blah, blah. So that when we get to the sort of God mode reveal at the end, we're like, wait, what? How are these two going to end up, they're on opposing sides, but inevitably they'll have to work together to try to save Deepika Padukone. And like, how do we, I want to see all that unfold, hopefully in the second installment of this.
I got to give a shout out to Disha Patani, who played Roxy. She was a highlight. She just shows up, is beautiful, is like kicks butt for a bit, like kicks our hero's butt and everyone around him. Then like is in the movie for about half an hour, and we never see her again. So hopefully she's back in the sequel too.
Totally. She shows up. She like looks amazing. She has like perfect abs that you're like, that's insane. They have a little musical sequence, and then she's like, bye. And she's just like not in the movie anymore. And I'm like, All right. So many of these movies, music is such a huge factor. I mean, I think like that was, I mean, obviously like RRR Academy Award winning music. I don't feel like the music in this, I liked it, but it didn't stand out to me as much as something like an RRR. And I know you had mentioned like you want to watch Pushpa at some point. That to me is like God tier music. That's like one of my favorite
cool.
soundtracks
Awesome.
of all time.
I've downloaded it on my iPad to watch on the plane to Thailand tomorrow. So
nice,
yeah.
awesome.
And as I left the cinema for this one, there was a massive poster for Pushpa 2. So
yes, oh my
it's
God.
good. You got as long as if you give me the pressure of another one coming out, I'm like, okay, I've got to watch them now. Like I watched Two Tigers and War like 2 days before
before Tiger 3.
No, it wasn't Patan, before Patan came out.
Yeah.
I had to know everything that universe had to show me.
So true. That YRF Spy universe is so much fun. It's like, I know that was almost like, because I had talked about that with you guys, and then you guys were like, dude, watch the Fast and the Furious movies. It's this. So then I was like, oh, okay, like I probably should do that. And then I ended up watching Fast 10, which is like not the best Fast and the Furious movie.
Is it still the only Fast movie you've seen?
I saw 1 and 2, so okay. I do know about Ejectocito, so I'm there.
Keep pushing. Once you get to 5, 6, 7, I think is like just an unbeatable run of like insane action movies. So you know more about Telugu cinema than I do. It definitely feels like this movie has a lot of pressure to be what people expect a Tollywood movie to be, where it has to be around the 3-hour mark. There has to be an interlude, and there has to be these songs, even though they make very little sense in the context of the movie. Like I think to RRR's credit, like the song is so fucking sick. It's sure. Like that song is as good as any of the best action scenes in that movie. Yeah. Thus, it's one of the best musical sequences of all time to me. Totally. And it's like, you know, it has our lead characters singing and dancing. And it's so integral to like the overall plot of like Indians versus British people, and also the plot of the friendship of the two leads. It's like, it's a perfect like musical moment, whereas completely this agree. Is just like and like they may as well just be dancing to like, you know, elevator music. It looked like karaoke visuals.
There's a real thing with these movies. It's called the item number, and it's basically where you have like your item song. So you have like a hot girl come in and do a song, and a lot of the time the song just feels so unrelated to anything. Yeah. And I think Rajamouli is one of the few people who can take that and make it have a point. So like Baahubali has like a really good sequence in the first movie where they go to that kind of like brothel, and he's doing this dance with these three beautiful
taking their clothes off.
Yeah, exactly. But Rajamouli is one of the few that like integrates that into the plot of the film in a way where it like makes sense. I mean, he's just like, I feel like he is on a level that's so different in terms of like his action all has emotional impact. The songs in there all fit the narrative. It's just the kind of thing where it's just like tens across the board, because he's managed to take every idea and every sort of expectation and thing that you're supposed to do in Telugu cinema and just elevate it, you know? And this, I felt like there are sequences in this. There's a lot of cameos in this for people that are like huge superstars in Telugu movies or in South Indian movies. And I was like, I've kind of compared it to like Avengers in a way, where it's like if you watched like Infinity War and Endgame and you were like, I have not watched like any Guardians of the Galaxy movies, or I saw Iron Man 1, like you would be kind of like, who the fuck is everybody? What is this? Why does everyone care? Okay, so Captain America got Thor's hammer and everyone was excited, but like, what's the impact of that, you know? So I felt a little bit like that, where I was like, this movie does kind of require a little bit of prior knowledge of those things, because like there's a sequence in here where Prabhas interacts with this guy that's like a vendor who like sells him. He gives him an egg in this like case because eggs are so rare and hard to come by. And everybody in my theater was like exploding when that happened. And I thought like this would be something where people who don't know who this guy is, it's Ram Gopal Varma, he's a director. I was like, it would be just be like, oh, I guess that's probably somebody, you know? So there's a lot of these little like cameo moments in here. Even the reveal of Arjuna at the end of the movie when they're kind of doing the flashback to gods battling gods. That's this actor Vijay Deverakonda, who's like a really big deal in Telugu cinema. So I was like, there's all these things where I'm like, I think without the prior knowledge, it's still a good movie. Like it's still fun, but with the prior knowledge, it's like way more fun. And even me, I'm like, I have like maybe 30% of the prior knowledge that I should have for something like this. But even with that little 30%, I was like, oh, that's so and so. Oh, okay, that's that person's cameo. Oh, wow. And of course, like the Rajamouli cameo to me being like the best cameo of them all.
So that we could talk about it. Yeah,
so that, good. Yeah.
Obviously recognized him straight away because he's in his own movies.
Yes.
And I even have like merch of a cartoon version of him from a weird collaboration that RRR did with Hello Kitty and Sanrio. But I recognized him and I got all the jokes. I felt very good because they make a joke about, he's like, you still owe me for something from 10 years ago, which is when Baahubali was made. And he says this to Prabhas, obviously the lead of the movie. He's like chasing him. And then he's like, I'm going to get you. And he's like, oh no, if he gets me, then he won't let me go for 5 years, because that's how long it took to make Baahubali, I imagine. So not one or two other jokes. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like,
yeah, I love that. That to me, my theater, like it wasn't like a full theater because I had to see this like on a sort of early screening in an afternoon. And even then people were like screaming, like it was a huge deal when Rajamouli came on screen. And then the joke about, I'll keep you for 10 years. And he's like, oh no, if he gets me, he'll keep me for 5 years. It was like, I was like, yes, love it. Okay. I understood that reference because Prabhas was in that for so long to make those movies. So yeah, I was like, okay, I love this. I feel like that's the easy one that I'm like, okay, you could get this one. Rajamouli's accessible for everybody.
And yeah, and another cameos like looked familiar, but obviously didn't place them. But like they also, it's not like, I feel like there weren't that many other references to the people that Rajamouli got when those cameos, or if they were, I missed them.
Yeah, I think that's where, like, to me, I think it works on its own, especially that second half, I feel like, is where you're just like, this is really fun. Like, I'm like, I don't know anything about Hindu mythology, but I've seen enough comic book movies to know when we're introducing a big time character, or when there's been a huge battle, or when we need some backstory or things like that. Like, I think the sort of cinematic language of it kind of tells you, like, this is going to be important. This is a flashback thing you need to know. This is a big time weapon that no one can hold. The guy tries to like have the robot arm pick up the bow and it like melts and he's like, no one can touch this. And you're like, clearly that's going to be a big deal. Like, I'm curious with this. I think there's a lot of emphasis placed on the car Buji that they built. Like, that's a big deal. I actually felt like that character really worked. I was like, this is giving me very like sort of Iron Man, like
Jarvis.
It's
Jarvis,
totally
finally.
Exactly. It's Jarvis. It's a little bit like Millennium Falcon, K2SO, and that droid that Phoebe Waller-Bridge was and stuff. Yep. So it's like, it's giving me a little bit of that. And I was like, okay, like, I think this is working.
Oh man, in spite of my like overall, like, just pretty positive review. Like, I would buy a car of that for sure.
Totally.
I mean, but that doesn't say much. I buy toys of everything.
Yeah. So overall, I mean, I think I'm definitely on board for the next one of these. I'm really curious about it. I think like the fact that it's doing so well is great because it tells me we will get a next one of these. And I like the idea of, an original sci-fi. I feel like for me, we've seen so many movies that feel like pre-existing IP, or it's not that originality is kind of missing from like Hollywood films. So I really liked that this is its own thing. And it's like, what if we made this whole world? It feels insanely ambitious, and I really appreciated that about it. So I think that's also where I was like, I'm grading on a little bit of a curve here, because the points I'm awarding this for ambition make me like, yeah, I'm on board. I want to see where we go with this for the next chapter.
I'm so down for a sequel. Obviously we know it's coming. You've described it a few times as the beginning of a cinematic universe. Do you see this as more than just having a sequel, or are they going to do more movies in this, do you think? Or
I think like I could definitely see them doing a second one. I could see them maybe doing a third one and making it a trilogy. Sure. Because it seems like there's a lot of story to tell here. So I could see maybe having almost kind of like some mini bosses and some small things, in the next one, where we get kind of that like two towers, and then we get like the full Return of the King in a third chapter. So I'll be curious to see
if they spend most of that movie in the past, which I think they might.
Yeah, I get the sense we're going to get a lot of sort of flashbacks and explanation, and actually this person was this, and he's the reincarnation of this, but he doesn't remember, and blah blah blah. Like, I think we're going to get a lot of that, which I'm down for. I mean, I one of the things I loved about like Rajamouli movies is he'll do like an hour of backstory in those movies of like
Baahubali's like so good for that. That
totally.
was like, yeah, realizing, oh, they're not actually going to go back to the present by the end of the first movie. Like it's,
Totally.
or they do very only at the very end to like set up.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's so well done.
The pacing of that, to be able to do that, and everyone's like, yeah, I'm on board with 3 more hours of this till I can find out what happens 5 minutes from the scene I just saw. Like, that's amazing to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I can definitely see sequels to this movie, but the idea of this being like a cinematic universe with spin-offs and stuff, I think if you have to maintain, I can't remember what term you used to describe the things that every Hollywood movie has to hit. I can just like, you thought we got exhausted of like the MCU quickly. Imagine if every movie is 3 hours long and has the songs stuck into it. I feel like, is there room for experimentation within this world from a film point of view, or is it even more hard set in what it has to be? Is it only like these enormous, huge, long blockbusters that will make back the money? I don't know.
Totally. I wonder that too, because it feels like they are more willing to take risks here.
Yeah, and I agree that the CGI backgrounds especially look a lot better than RRR did, I guess, overall. But I think RRR is cinematically a much better looking movie, and then just in terms of action choreography, it just could wipes the floor with this movie. So
Well, it's like the George Lucas thing of, a special effect without a story is a pretty boring thing. Like, I think Rajamouli is king of that, where it's like he really understands that, like, that sequence where Beam jumps out of the truck with all the animals. I mean, the animals don't have to look photorealistic because it doesn't matter, because it's badass. Like, it looks amazing.
just the fact that RR opens with him catching the tiger, and then you finally get the payoff of why he did that. Like, one, it's a really badass way to introduce a character who like almost loses his life in while doing that at the beginning, but he's still really badass while doing it. And then just the payoff. Man, I get goosebumps just thinking about that movie. It was, and especially I think it was dead in the middle of COVID, and it was like this ray of light.
Totally. It was one of those things. I just remember everybody watching that, and the experience was just, this is the most like I have felt joy watching a film in so long. And everyone was just like, no, it's amazing. You got to check it out. And I remember kind of like trying to sell some of my friends on it. Like, they were like, yeah, but it's like 3.5 hours. And like, I got to read subtitles and all this stuff. I was like, I promise you, if you watch this, you will not regret it. This will be the best like 3.5 hours you've ever spent in your life. And then inevitably they would watch it, and then I would get like a text that was like, holy shit, that's the best thing I've ever seen.
Turns out reading in movies is cool.
Exactly. I feel like that should be like the poster child for subtitles, where it's like, look, I'm not saying that you have to watch like a boring subtitled movie that's very like art school, film student kind of film. Like, you can see subtitled movies that are also amazing, blockbuster, action filled, just fantastic, the moviest movie of experiences for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Levins, thank you so much for doing this.
Genuine pleasure.
Levins, tell everyone where they can find you, and I'll put all your links and stuff in the description.
So I host a podcast every week, well, except this week. My co-host Angus has a throat infection, and I'm about to go overseas for 2 weeks, so I guess no Hey Fam for a while. But yeah, my podcast is called Hey Fam, and it is a very, very loose 2 hours each week where we talk about movies, TV, video games, pop culture, and increasingly more and more deranged videos that find their ways to our algorithms on Instagram and social media, and exploring the people behind those videos. The goal each week for Hey Fam is the night before we record an episode, if my wife leans over to me while I'm in bed and says, "What are you watching?" as I do my research for the episode, I know it's going to be a good podcast.
There you go. It's going to be a hit. Awesome.
So that's Hey Fam. You can find that wherever you find podcasts. And then nice. I make videos about toys and travel and Japanese culture and other pop culture stuff on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. At Levins Online is my account name.
Nice. And I love your videos because I learn about toys and things that I did not know that I needed, that I'm suddenly like, oh, that's so cool. I need that little piece of plastic in my house somewhere.
Yeah. Hopefully Kalki is popular enough in Japan that, because we didn't talk about that, but RRR like screened in Japan. It was so popular in Japan that it screened for over a year at the cinemas. And like, people would like go to the fucking movies in Japan. Like I went to go see like exclusively like Tuesday or like Thursday night 9 p.m. sessions, and it was a completely full cinema of movies that had been out for weeks at that point. And RRR,
really?
yeah, apparently full cinemas right up until the end of its long run.
Yeah, I think it played for like over a year there.
So cool. And yeah, Sanrio, who make Hello Kitty and many other characters merchandise, did a collaboration with RRR. So you have like their cute dog character and their cute fish character riding on each other's shoulders, a la Beam and Ram in RRR. It's like, yeah, the best shit ever.
That's the ultimate. I can't wait to see. I want the Japanese Kalki merch. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. Just like everything, little Prabhas figures and all sorts of stuff. I'm like, I can't
Pregnant
wait.
Hello Kitty.
Yeah, seriously. The Handmaid's Tale Hello Kitty. Can't wait for that.
Great. 90-year-old Pachaco the dog. No, sorry, 9,000-year-old Pachaco the dog
There
with
you
a
go.
cane and
With
bandages.
like a gem. Yeah, of course. That's what you need.
Excellent stuff.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Levins, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully we'll be able to do this again and talk about the insanity that is the morning show at some point.
Anytime. Thanks so much.